Hi, I'm Rod Saunders from Jew and Greek. Neil deGrasse Tyson is an astrophysicist who has appeared on countless TV shows, radio programs, and podcasts over the years. He's one of the most famous scientists of our day, not because he's a great scientist, but because he's a scientist who is great on TV. I call him the Dr. Phil of astrophysics. So the other day, a video of him popped up on my feed discussing God and religion. Here it is.
Do you believe in God?
Every description of God that I've heard holds God to be all-powerful, very typical, and all good. And then I look around and I see a tsunami that killed 250,000 people in Indonesia, an earthquake that killed 250,000 people in Haiti, and I see earthquakes and tornadoes and disease, childhood leukemia, and I see all of this and I say, I do not see evidence of both of those being true simultaneously. If there is a God, the God is either not all-powerful or not all good. Can't be both.
Good answer. It's my question of the year.
So I'm. If you have good evidence, I'm good for it. But I'm evidence-driven.
You need evidence.
More
You're a
than
scientist.
I'm faith-driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
And by the way, to be faith-driven is one thing, but to be faith-driven and try to create legislation on that affects other people who don't share your faith,
right.
That's the beginnings of a theocracy. And we have evidence of what that is in the past, and our founding fathers specifically founded this country to prevent that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first of all, let's discuss this argument. He says that God is supposedly all good and all powerful, and yet we have disease, disasters, and death on the earth. So he concludes that either God isn't all good, or he isn't all powerful, or more likely, in his opinion, God just isn't, period. And of course, the audience of the Chelsea Handler show claps like he just made a brilliant observation. What he actually did, though, is invoke an ancient riddle known as Epicurus's Trilemma. Epicurus was a Greek philosopher who lived 300 years before Christ and was one of the main proponents of the concept of the atom. He was a materialist, which means that he believed that matter is all that exists, which means that he was kind of an ancient atheist or agnostic. A trilemma is a three-point philosophical proposition. In Epicurus' trilemma, the 3 points were, number one, if God is unable to prevent evil, then he is not all-powerful. Number two, if God is not willing to prevent evil, then he is not all good. Number three, if God is both willing and able to prevent evil, then why does evil exist? The insinuation, of course, is that there is no God. Atheists have used this trilemma for centuries to suggest that philosophical arguments for the existence of God are problematic. This is called the problem of evil. How can we say that God exists when the world is in such a mess? In Christian apologetics, we have what we call Theodicy, which is the practice of addressing the problem of evil. So I'm going to do a little of that now. Tyson's problem here is that he's addressing the issue from a philosophical perspective. As I've mentioned several times, reality can't be fully explained through the 5 physical senses. The Bible gives us truth that was obtained by revelation, which doesn't come through the physical senses. In the Bible, we are given the answer to Epicurus' third point. Evil exists because God gives his creatures free will. He could have ensured that the earth would remain a paradise by removing the element of choice from man, but God is love, and he created us with the capacity to love, and love requires the ability to choose. Unfortunately, the ability to choose brings with it the ability to make the wrong choices and suffer the consequences for those choices. And that's why the world is full of disease, disaster, and death. It's not because God isn't all-powerful or all-loving. It's because man chose to rebel against his creator and invited evil into the world. The good news is that God is merciful, and he came up with a plan to redeem mankind from his fallen state by becoming a man and paying the price for our salvation. And one day the kingdom of God will be established on the earth, and Jesus will reign over his creation. The effects of the fall of man will be undone, and the evil that has brought so much suffering on the earth will be eradicated, and God will wipe all the tears from our eyes. Tyson says he sees no evidence for God's existence, but creation itself testifies to its creator. The world of science acknowledges the appearance of design within living organisms. Before Darwin's book on evolution, On the Origin of the Species, it was pretty much the working assumption that the appearance of design was evidence that there was design, and thus a designer. But Darwin's explanation of natural selection working on random variations or mutations seemed to explain away the need for a designer. But all that science has ever been able to prove by observation and testing is adaptations within the species. The evolution from one species to another can't be observed because the time frame required is too long. So they have to resort to extrapolation. In other words, an educated guess. But regardless of your stance on Darwin's theory, both sides agree that life forms appear to be designed. The same goes for the universe itself. Einstein said, "The scientist is possessed by the sense of universal causation." His religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority that, compared with it, all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection. This feeling is the guiding principle of his life and work, insofar as he succeeds in keeping himself from the shackles of selfish desire. The fact is, the universe is balanced on a razor's edge. If the force of gravity was altered just 1 part in 10 to the power of 34, the universe would either expand too fast to form galaxies or collapse back in on itself. The famous scientist Christopher Hitchens said that the fine-tuning of the universe was the best argument for the existence of God. The renowned theoretical physicist Freeman Dyson said, "It seems as if the universe knew that we were coming." British astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle said, "A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature." So it's not like there's no evidence. You just have to be willing to see it and acknowledge it. And as for the theocracy comment, this is baffling to me. A theocracy is when a religious group runs the nation, which is what we see in Iran. To suggest that citizens electing representatives who reflect their views on morality based on their religion is somehow the beginning of a theocracy is ridiculous. This is how a representative democracy works. When you see a religious organization gathering support for overthrowing the government and writing a new constitution based on their religious views, that would be the beginnings of a theocracy. If you were to tell religious people that they can't participate in the electoral process, that would be tyranny. So it seems to me that Dr. Tyson is driven more by his worldview than he is by evidence and reason, which is why I don't recommend listening to the Dr. Phil of astrophysics. Thanks for watching, and be blessed.